It is a pleasure to see you. We have not done one of these for quite some time, video on the Canucks. I'm in the office, you are not, although we are endeavoring to, we were supposed to do this yesterday, but life gets in the way.
Yeah.
We are endeavoring to do them in person and not via this recording thing. But it's good to see you. Good to
Yeah.
have the Canucks back. Good to have you able to go in the room. All these things going to make a little bit of difference. Now, you were a little self-conscious before we got started because of your sweater, saying you were wrinkly. And hell, you're a sports writer. You're supposed to be wrinkly.
I know. I mean, this was what the great casting of Spotlight, the movie. They said everybody looks rumpled, so
Yeah.
I'll take that as a compliment. I'm wearing a sweater, so I'm just deciding to upgrade this season.
I have a good friend that I met through the business. Used to be the general manager of Nintendo Canada. His name is Ron Bertram, and he said that, and it's the best description I've ever heard of anyone. At his wedding, his best man said he was the human equivalent of an unmade bed, which is so accurate for him, but it also describes a sports writer. That's always
Well
stuck
put.
with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should say that this Canucks video we're going to bring to you every week, every Thursday usually, discussing the topics that are hot in Canucks world. It's brought to you by Woody's RV World, woodysrv.com, Western Canada's largest selection of RVs. They've got all sorts of weekly specials on. They've got cashback bonuses if you sign up for various things. So check them out, woodysrv.com. We're very happy to have them on board as a sponsor. And we are even dreaming up a contest where maybe we can get an RV and take Canuck fans down to Seattle or even further, Vegas, California. Who knows, Patrick? That would be quite the trip and quite the video if you're able to pull that off.
I call it on the road with Coos.
Yeah, exactly. You'd never get across the border. Okay, let's start with the Canucks. I have found it interesting. We do have, if you haven't seen it, we've got a new Game Day Live feature where we're going to be having writers drop in all day and answer your questions, anything that pops up in Canucks World and do it. So I was in there this morning in our first one. We've obviously got all the great season preview stuff that you guys have done so far, but I was taking a bit of a spin around other sports media and hockey media websites, and it's quite funny when you look at the perceptions of this team from outside. I mean, obviously people look at what Boudreau did last year, and I see many people note the fact that they say they have the sixth best record in the NHL since Boudreau took over, the third best defensive record. But everyone's picking them to either just miss the playoffs or just make the playoffs. The expectations for this team are not very high. Is that accurate to you from what you've seen?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Everyone seemed, and I agree that generally the forwards are better. Adding a guy like Kuzmenko is certainly as a shooter is an interesting option. Adding on top of Brock Besser, who, wants and believes he can have a full season. But that defense still is what we saw last year. It's the Jack Rathbone will, I think they're obviously hopeful can add a big element there, but realistically, he's a new face and not a player that anyone's, I think, really says is going to be a standout star rookie of the year candidate. And otherwise it's the same group of defensemen they had last year. Obviously they're hoping that Quinn Hughes can be even better than he already was. They're hopeful that Oliver Ekman-Larsson can at least, he was more solid, I think, than people realized, but still not the superstar defenseman he once was. And I don't think anybody expects him to be that. But again, you're sort of banking on a guy being more than we've kind of seen, and that's as people have said many times, hope is not a plan. And there's more. I would say more planning has gone into the assembly of this lineup, but there's still a lot there that was the same group as last year, a group that coming into last season most people didn't think was going to make the playoffs. So now sort of be this sort of 50-50 bet. I mean, that is an improvement, but that's far from the sort of rock solid playoff team, cup contender that you would expect to be if you were in the cap situation the Canucks currently are, which is that they are at the cap limit. And that's the truth in the end, is that they're paying a lot for what this is, and there are teams around the league that are built more, I suppose, efficiently.
But you say hope is not a plan, and I take that at face value. But this is a group that largely finished sixth under Bruce Boudreau last year. If there has been any love tossed the Canucks way in preseason, from what I've seen, it's a lot of people picking Demko either at the very least as a Vezina finalist, and potentially even the winner. So if you know your defense is a little suspect, but you've got a great goalie and you've
Hmm.
got some elite talent at the forward position, is it really just hope to think that you're, I mean, sixth in the NHL puts you not just as scrabbling for a wild card spot, puts you as you should potentially win around. So which is it? Is this a team that, of course, they still have serious questions to answer, but is this a team that can compete if their forwards play well and you get a full season of Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes is healthy and more mature and you have a lights out goaltender?
Yeah, the lights out goaltender aspect obviously changes a lot, and that was something that we saw the season before the pandemic started. The season that was ended, that was in the bubble. We saw how well they did in the bubble on the backs of outstanding goaltending performances from Jacob Markstrom and then Thatcher Demko. You're absolutely right. Your goalie can make a huge difference, and yes, if you're able to outscore your problems defensively, that can make a big difference. But in the end, it's, I mean, Luke Shen gave us the quote, I thought, of the preseason when he said, defense gets you wins. And he was honest about it at that point. Now, they hadn't had their full defensive core together at any point when he said that, but the overall picture was, clear to him. He said that we're going to be good this year. We have to be smarter defensively. We have to be more cohesive defensively, and that's because you want to win the puck back. It's, you want to break out well. You need to make sure that you control the puck more than the other team. Um, and that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, in the end, if they can't get the puck out of their own zone, all these fancy forwards that they have is going to be kind of pointless because they aren't going to be scoring. And that was the story at the beginning of last season. Like, that's the thing to don't forget. They couldn't score. The power play was terrible. The penalty kill was atrocious. Um, so the requirements for having a successful season um, are all there. I mean, we can see what they are, and you basically said, yeah. I mean, if you're going to score more goals, that's priority 1A, and priority 1-1 is getting good goaltending, and then hopefully in between you kind of survive your defensive battle. And the truth is, though, is you can't assess this team without looking at what else is going on in the division. And you look how strong Edmonton were last year. They're going to have a full season there. Jay Woodcroft. They've made some smart additions. They're rolling the dice a little bit on Jack Campbell in goal. You look at Calgary, who obviously were backed into a corner with the Gaudreau and Kachuk situations, and punched their way out of it. They've ended up in as a team that's probably at least as good as last year. Certainly a slightly different makeup, but offensively still going to be stellar. They've continued to be we know they'll continue to be a strong defensive team because of Daryl Sutter's their coach, and Jacob Markstrom is now another year older, but there was a guy who had a strong season for most of last year, and I think to me there's a bit of a question mark. Can he kind of get back to that solid goalie that he was certainly for the first year and a half he was in Calgary, and can they get enough out of their backup goalie Dan Vladar to basically keep Markstrom fresh, which is was a question here last year because we saw that with Demko as well. I mean, Demko in the end played more than probably should have as they went down the stretch. They had no faith in Jaro Halak. We'll see how they feel about Spencer Martin here. But that's the thing is you can't sort of look at any one thing and say this is what it's going to be. You need to have a coherent sort of approach to how you're planning for the season. And the reason why I say hope's not a plan is because that in the end was always the plan with the previous regime. And I would say this one, there is a little more coherence to what they're trying to do. But again, like I said, the defense is kind of same as it always was, and you're just in the big picture going to need more.
If you look at this team, obviously in that whole sort of playoff drought since their agonizingly close Stanley Cup flirtation back in 2011. There was that transition between periods, and there really wasn't a lot of hope there as the Sedins really began to slow down. There wasn't a lot else there to give fans hope. It seems to be the theme of the word of this video, Patrick, is hope. But now you do look at their top end elite talent. There's a lot more speed. There's a lot more skill. How big a part could special teams play in this? We've talked about Demko a little bit. They say your goalie is your best penalty killer. If they can lock that down and that you look at the skill that they can throw out now on the power play, is that something that could really elevate the Canucks' chances this season?
Well, they were a pretty lethal power play last year once they got rolling, and to be able to add at least the shot of Andrei Kuzmenko is very interesting. Kuzmenko himself admitted on the weekend, he said, listen, I've got a lot of still to learn here. I'm nowhere near to what, as he said, his maximum. And we asked Bruce Boudreau about it. He said the guy can shoot. And it's a different rink. The game is fundamentally different. Something Kuzmenko observed before training camp, which is feeling excited about the idea that he wins a puck battle in the corner and is almost immediately in front of the net. When you're playing on the bigger ice that you get in the KHL, that you get in Europe, those puck battles are further away from the net, and the game is structured differently because of that. There's a much more wider, sort of one-on-one. And then also sort of almost a systems game versus here where it's again, it's still one-on-one, but it is also, there's those, you just got to, it's more about being in the right position, anticipating, understanding where the play is going to be. And as he learns that offensively, the hope is of course from the Canucks is that he'll get even better and better. And then learning away from the puck. I mean, obviously on the power play, that's less of a question, but the special teams aspect absolutely is important. And then, the PK, I mean, we know last year that's what sank the first half of the season. They had a historically bad power play or a penalty kill. And they were so bad. It was sort of inconceivable how bad they were to even believe that they could, even if they improved and turned the ship around for the second half, that on the year it wouldn't be looked at being a reason why they didn't make the playoffs. And I think in the end, the reason why they didn't make the playoffs because they simply didn't pick up enough points, period, in the first half. But the story was very much there. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, this has been a long-standing story in Vancouver, certainly since, for the last decade at least. If you have top-end special teams, you can get away with a lot at 5-on-5 if you have your really good goalie, and generally they've had a really good goalie here, and that's a formula that will certainly, I think in Vancouver's case, that's why they're at least on sort of a 50-50 chance of making the playoffs this year versus last year, is that we have a better picture of what this team's going to be like, better picture of their goalie, and those special teams like you've highlighted are going to be kind of everything in that equation.
I'm just gonna write this down. This is the kind of insight that we pay you for. They didn't make the playoffs because they didn't pick up enough points. That's the kind of insight people are getting here every week when they
this goes back to the old Mickey years ago. Mickey Mantle was having his liver transplant, and one of the reporters, they had a press conference. The reporter said, "How's the donor doing?" And the doctor just looked at him and said, "You're a sports writer, aren't you?"
That's a good one. I actually hadn't heard that one before. So, Patrick, we will ask you to deliver some answers here. Canucks MVP this year.
Elias Pettersson. I want to see Quinn Hughes, but I think if they're going to be successful, and I'm making these calls on the assumption they are successful, it will be because Elias Pettersson turns into the two-way dominant 85-point threat that he's always suggested he should be.
His mindset certainly seems to be different now than it was this time last year.
I think he has that. I mean, there's always been this element to him. I can tell that he plays like a leader. He knows he should be driving the bus. I think in terms of him understanding, it's part of growing up. He's not a kid anymore. And it's learning how to manage your way through a room. You're not always going to, this is no shock. You're not going to get along with every single person in any group. But it's learning how to kind of push yourself forward and connect with everybody. And in the end, he's a guy whose play will do most of the talking. And we can see that there's sort of an energy, a commitment to what's going on. And he's healthy. He's coming into the last year's season. He wasn't 100%. He doesn't like to use that as a explanation, but he wasn't healthy coming into the season. He is fully healthy coming into the season and very tuned in and very dialed in. And he's just looked committed. Even in his preseason games, looked totally committed to what he's doing. And the power and the passion that burns inside him. So that to me, that's why I think you should hope that he's the MVP this season.
Who's the player with the biggest question mark over their head this year?
I want to say Brock Besser because he's made that commitment. We need to see that he can make it through a whole season. Is going to apparently play. He's ready to go despite having whatever it was he did to his hand in Whistler during training camp, a little ahead of schedule. But he's a guy that sort of laid it down. He's going to score 30 goals, and if he doesn't hit 30 goals, there's one reason or another. Either he's not playing enough. If he's not playing enough, that's an issue. He got hurt again. That, of course, will be an issue. or he's simply just not, not able to finish, and for whatever reason, he's always been a finisher, and if he's not finishing, then there's another question there.
Which player on the roster takes the biggest leap for you this year?
I think I'm going to say Jack Rathbone, just because he's kind of the young new face. A guy who his first two pro seasons were a little weird. Obviously signing in the summer of 2020 and having to leap into the strange season that was that, sort of COVID organized experience. A guy that didn't play a whole ton, got a lot, a good amount of practice time in, but didn't get to see a lot of games. Less than ideal for any young player stepping out of college. And something that the team itself highlighted, he didn't play it. You don't play a ton in college. You do get to work out, obviously get strength, but he didn't have a true transition into pro hockey. Last year, didn't play a ton to open the year. Then got sent to the minors, got hurt, had a tough sort of first half. Then really just found his groove in the second half for Abbotsford. So there's a lot of expectation there, and I think it should be tempered. But that said, if he can turn himself into that regular NHL defenseman that this team needs to find from within, because they've had so few defense prospects in the last, forever almost. This is a topic you and I have talked about for so long, but there's been, the number of successful defense prospects that have come through the Canucks system over the years is pretty shockingly poor, and. He needs to be the start of a turnaround in that department.
Someone we haven't really talked about much, and I think through all preseason this is the case, Bo Horvat. At the end of the season, is he still a Canuck? Has he re-signed? Or is he the big bargaining chip going into next offseason, as everyone thought JT Miller was this year?
I mean, this is the interesting one, and I think it's one I think about a lot, and we don't talk, hasn't been talked about a lot, but that element of how the Miller contract is structured, like he doesn't actually have no move or no trade clause in his current contract. Canucks decided not to add that in. They could have. In his new contract, there is obviously both, but that doesn't kick until next summer, and that's part of this story, I think. I mean, at some point, the Canucks are going to be looking and seeing how they're doing in the second half. And if they're in the playoff chase, it's hard to see them making any kind of move on either player. And that, to me, is going to be the determining factor. I think the odds are, as a result, even if it makes sense, if something's gone haywire at the deadline, or they're not in the race somehow, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this management group to truly make some changes. And certainly Horvat and Miller would be players who would be candidates for that. But Horvat, I think in the end, to your question, I think he's going to be, despite everything, I think he'll still be a Canuck at the end of the season. He's, too important to this team. He is that guy that goes out and get you the goal. And, if you're a team that's trying to make the playoffs, you need that kind of guy. Even if the smart move would be to, if they don't have him under contract beyond next summer, would be to move him. It's the tough. In many ways, I think it's a tougher question than Miller last year, because Miller, at least, had another year on his contract, and you could see scenarios where even now, like I said, there's a possibility he gets moved on. But it's a tough one to answer. But I think if I have to go on a probabilities, I think Bo Horvat's still here at the end of the season.
Podkolzin, what are you expecting from him this season?
You'd like to see a 20-goal season. He has, like the rest of the team, started slowly but found his groove. And by the end of the year, especially once Bruce Boudreau had a sort of sense of what his team was, and he'd come to sort of understand his players, and that's still something he's still going through. He'll tell you, he's still learning a lot about his players and their strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, Vasily Podkolzin, like he's a guy that certainly, you want to see him helping out on the second power play unit. He's not the first option to penalty kill, but he's a guy that I think is smart enough and understands the game well enough. He should become a penalty killer. If you can see him killing some penalties this season, that's a great sign. I mean, yeah, offensively, you want to see, he had a decent output, but you want to see, hit 20 goals. I mean, that's what you need from a player his age and from a young player coming in the league who's going to be the two-way. He was drafted. Look where he was drafted. He was drafted, a solid, not elite tier, but first tier in the first round. I mean, he's got a guy that you want to see production from, and he's shown every sign that he should be that player in the years to come.
Okay, do the Canucks make the playoffs?
Yes, I think they do. I think in the end, it is tight, obviously, in this division. Like I said, Calgary and Edmonton, I think, are
Man,
rightly
so tight.
like a playoff game. Is that what you
Almost,
mean?
we hope, I guess, yeah.
But yeah, you've got the Oilers and you got the Flames, who I think are the class of the bunch. Vegas, continues. They're still a strong team. Bit of sliding a little bit from that cup contender that they were for a brief moment, but still a very strong team. LA obviously made the playoffs last year. They've got a lot of young talent, another year older. They'll be tricky. They'll be difficult. I think that's those two teams are the real kind of rivals for this Canucks group. And of course, you can't count out the Central Division, and the challenges they bring to the table. So
did the Canucks not just make the playoffs and one round, and it's like, okay, we've got a taste, or do you think they can do some damage?
I think in the end, it comes down to the health of the team. And that's true in any playoff run. It's sort of the healthiest team makes it through. I think if they get in the playoffs, they could win a round. But in the end, it is like that lesson. Like last year, you look at you say the Oilers surprised people, and I think in the end and did quite well. But they also have the best player in the world. The Canucks don't have a best player in the world candidate. They have some very, very good top end talent. There's no doubt about that.
Well, how many teams can have a best player in the world?
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is that we showed, but in the end, look at how well they went in 2020, right? Like they had their best players showed up, and that's how far they went. And that they also had the good fortune of playing against, especially early on, a couple teams that weren't all that motivated to be there. And I don't think you're going to have that advantage this year. So yeah, sure, they could win a round, but the the second round is going to be hard, and trying to get past the second round is going to, once you get into on and on and on. I think this is a team that's good enough to make the playoffs. With a good run of games, could win a first round, sure. Which is, in the end, that's what ownership is interested in. They want some home playoff dates. Everyone else would like to see this team being planning to win the Stanley Cup, and I don't think that's going to happen this year.
We don't have enough time to get into ownership, so we'll save that for next week. But I do want to thank Woody's RV World. Again, woodysrv.com. Big supporters of all our Canucks coverage. Check them out. All sorts of great deals on their website. And hopefully maybe we can even pull off this road trip down the year. Speaking of that, I know you're almost on the plane to Philly. We've got Coos starting in Edmonton. You're going to the States to Philly. Always a place dear to my heart because of our good friend Jason Botchford.
Yeah.
Such great stories of him on the road always. And you have your Instagram, Patty J on the road. If you're as my younger daughter said to me when I wouldn't follow her Instagram, and so finally I did, and she said, I didn't realize you were a grammer. Anyway, Patrick, you are a grammer. Patty J on the road. You do finally get back on the road. We get to travel with the team this year. So I know with a couple of young kids that's difficult for you, but enjoy the trip to Philly. You always have great insight, bringing us pictures of, a little bit of a peek behind the scenes of what it's like to cover the Canucks on the road. It's nice that you're able to do that this year.
Thanks, Paul. It's going to be interesting. It's never boring.
Let's hope not, and let's hope this video wasn't boring. We are going to do them every week for you. As I said, we've got a whole suite of Canucks features to bring you every single week, including our Canucks report. Please sign up for our newsletter. We'll deliver all this stuff brainlessly to your inbox every week. And that's not brainless coverage, that's brainless delivery. There we go. Have a good week, everyone. Drop the puck. Game on.